ago, the drainage report that was provided by the outside engineer disclosed that about 1/3 of the cross-section has been compromised. So that it's a shallow culvert, it's a corrugated metal pipe, so not a very strong pipe, under ironwood, and it is collapsed so that it's, instead of being a nice round circle anymore, it's now kind of an ellipsoid that is 1/3 less in surface area than the original circle.
So it is open for
It's
water
open.
to flow?
Yes, yes.
Just a reduced amount?
A reduced amount. And the engineer estimated that the reduced amount would cause this backwater condition that might threaten structural flooding.
Might. Okay.
Just a comment, I know exactly where that culvert is, but the flow through there is not inhibited at all. I'm familiar with that area and walked the property many, many times, and actually have gone through that culvert and we cleaned it out several times, so.
It might well be the case that maintenance is often, if not always, an important characteristic in the functioning of culverts, in their hydraulic function. The engineer's estimate was that 1/3 of the capacity had been attenuated. It's a substantial wash. It's about a 500 CFS cubic feet per second wash. So out of an abundance of caution, I think the project engineer highlighted those considerations.
It's fine.
Anybody else from the commission have a question for the engineer?
I have a couple of comments, but I'm not sure they're directed to CJ, maybe to the applicant.
Or the applicant, okay.
Mr.
Green.
Mr. Green.
Chairman, Commissioners, my name is Tyler Green. I'm the architect. Would you like me to present first or take questions first?
Give us your best shot.
All right. I want to stress that there is a definite hardship on this property. Stacy did a great job as usual, created by the unusual topography and soil conditions. Basically, we're building on a large slab of granite. To cut into that would make building here almost impossible to balance the cut and fill. As Stacy said, it's a modest size home under the maximum lot coverage. So that allows us to maintain most of the existing boulder outcroppings. It's designed to sit low on the site, and it's under Carefree's maximum height requirement. It was approved by the HOA. I discussed the home with several of the neighbors, even the ones in Scottsdale. It's surrounded by open space. And lastly, even if the floor was lowered, it wouldn't change the house because, we would just have higher ceilings. The roof would stay in the same place. So, your questions?
Yeah, I understand what you're doing, I think, but for utilities and other lines, are you still going to have to blast, or?
There won't be any blasting. There will be some hammering to get utilities. The utilities are the only thing that we're planning on. We're planning on building on top of the rocks, but there will be some sewer lines and that sort of thing that's going to have to get cut in.
Trench for?
Yes.
Okay. Question?
Yeah, I actually went and looked at the property.
Mm-hmm.
I drove around in the boulders and got lost a couple of times until I found it. Because the material that we got, the aerial photographs didn't really demonstrate the complexities of the lot.
Mm-hmm.
It's absolutely gorgeous lot. There are, I think I counted 7 mature ocotillos on the property that I'm sure the new owners will protect. But it's an unusual lot because it slopes from east to west down, but there are these really large flat rocks. The word outcropping sort of really doesn't describe it because we think of outcropping as sort of things that go up.
Vertical.
These things are flat.
Right.
And once I saw those, it became very obvious what you were up against. You either blast a bunch of those away and then put the house flat down in whatever is left, and then there wouldn't be any cut and fill, which makes no sense, or you take as little of the rocks as necessary, build the house up a little bit, and put dirt underneath. So the idea that you have to have more fill than cut makes perfectly good sense. It's one of the, I think, textbook reasons why there have to be exceptions to general cut and fill rules, and I think this is a perfect example of an exception. So I'm perfectly in favor of this. I think it's a terrific project, and I'm very impressed by the way that you've used the site and minimized the cutting on those big rock slabs that you have to deal with.
Yeah, thank you. That's a
Which
perfect,
will be, I think, very beautiful, landscaped nicely.
perfect description of what we're up against.
Other questions? Can I get a motion?
Second?
You're moving approval, I take it? Okay.
I move for approval.
What?
Approval with conditions.
With conditions.
Yes.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.
All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it, do have it so ordered. Welcome to
Welcome to the Boulders.
the Boulders. Now you're going to have to deal with her because she's used to walking her dog over there. Thank you, welcome. Okay, we have to wait 1.5 minutes.
Can I just make a couple quick announcements?
Sure, make a couple of quick announcements.
As many of you reached out to you know, and also for the public's information, Gary Neese.
Stacy, would you put your microphone closer to,
Closer?
so I can hear you? Yes, closer.
Okay.
I can.
Thank you, this is better. Gary Neese, our town administrator of 24 years, has put in his first retirement. So it was kind of bittersweet for him, but he appreciated a lot of the notes that you all had sent back to him. Time for him to enjoy life. Not that he hasn't enjoyed his life up to this point, for the record. Also, I think that I didn't mention to you, which many of you may or may not know, but also the water company manager did retire as well, Greg Crossman. So yes, so he's also.
He kept that very low profile.
It was low profile and quick.
Oh, was that?
It was
Okay.
relatively quick, so. And so obviously in the process of filling both those positions, so. If you have any questions, let me know, but I just wanted to be sure you all were aware.
Well, as I understand it, Gary has succeeded into the administrator's position from the
Yes.
Planning and Zoning Director. So I'm wondering, are you applying for the town administrator's
comment.
position? Oh. Okay, we are now at 4:15, so the Planning and Zoning Commission will be called to order.
I need a motion to adjourn.
Oh, no, didn't we do that? No, we approved.
I
Okay,
so
have a
move.
Motion to adjourn the
So move.
second.
Good.
All those in favor say aye. The ayes
Aye.
appear to have it, do have so ordered. Okay, now, I'm calling to order the Planning and Zoning Commission. You'll take roll call. Regular agenda, first is approval of the minutes of the September 8th meeting. Can I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it, do have it so ordered. Before we, or as we open item number 2, Stacy, can you just shed a little bit of background as to why our very wise legislature decided to pass House Bill 2447?
Well, this is, from my opinion, I don't know any of them or have spoken with any of them. However, I think that their objectives through many of, likely the home builders and general contractors associations, are always looking to reduce what they consider project delays. And so sort of the main, and we'll kind of get into this, I think the main crux of House Bill 2447 was to have many of the development processes be administratively approved by staff versus going through a public hearing process, going to P&Z and then eventually to town council. I think that also related to this amendment are other things that help, again, potentially expedite the process for builders. One being at-risk grading permits. Many times there's projects, and it tends to be some of the larger projects. They're working on their development plans, and they're ready. They want to kind of get the site development ready, and usually grading is kind of that first step. And so I think that is we get that request. We have gotten that request from time to time. Typically, us being so small, as we also have a hesitation. So being small, managing that kind of process, but also being small, and sometimes people move forward with a project, and then all of a sudden things stop, and the concern is being left with a parcel that has has a bare spot where there used to be desert. Existing desert. The last thing they were looking to do is also to somewhat reward those builders, developers, applicants, architects, those that are that have a good record in terms of meeting town requirements and know the process, and allowing again for a smoother permit process so that they can move their projects forward a little bit more quickly. There's another component of it that wasn't a requirement, which was called self-certification. A lot of the larger communities utilize that process where applicants go in based on their qualifications, and they meet certain requirements, and they basically self-permit their projects. And so we didn't think that was really a good idea for the town of Carefree, for one. So in summary, that's sort of the reasoning behind it. I think it's for a more streamlined process for the development.
So
The project.
I was under the impression as well that it got caught up in this movement to encourage affordable housing, and that a lot of the delay was adding cost to the home builders and slowing things down, which I may have some sympathy on, may not have some sympathy on, but by including the site plan approval, just so that everybody realizes nothing that's happening on the northeast corner in terms of public hearing or discussions or a hearing or appearance before here or appearance before the town council will ever happen again. So if the northwest corner, for example, of Carefree Highway and Tom Darlington, if that starts moving, that's all going to be done by staff.
No, I would, not to correct you, Chairman, but what I would say that actually is a little bit different in the sense that if the northwest corner moves forward based on its current entitlements, then you are correct. If they would like to develop those parcels at the rural 70 size residential lots, you're right, that would not go that would just go to staff. But if they do if there's development that's going to move forward based on the general plan, they will need to rezone it, and all those entitlements still go through public hearing processes.
So, but the northeast corner, if this bill would have been approved 2 years ago, for example, would any of the discussions that we had on the northeast corner have been required or permitted even?
They would not have been, right. They
So
would have
that
just
would have
gone
all
right
been
to
done by
staff.
staff.
And staff, well, I mean, we would have looked back at the entitlements. I mean, that did have, fortunately with the northeast corner, there was certain criteria that was approved along with that entitlement. But correct, now, for example, when the developer comes back, I guess this is a good question. I thought our legal counsel would be here. I will ask him.
They got your back, right?
No?
Yeah.
Well, they had a baby recently, so maybe there's some issue there. I hope not. In any case, the question should be asked is that will the other two parcels associated with the overall development of the northeast corner still require development review board approval, maybe because they already had gone through since it's part of an overall development process? I don't know. That the remaining two parcels potentially may not come in front of the development review board.
So if, just hypothetically talking about the 48 acres that people are talking about for the park, if that should be acquired by somebody and they wanted to subdivide it, that would all be handled by staff. It would be platted by staff. It would be all of it, unless they wanted to change the zoning.
Right. Well, maybe we can get into the presentation, but what I'm hoping is that
I just think it's very important that the people of Carefree understand that this public, and why the legislature did this, it's offensive, frankly, to neighborhoods. That they usurped the authority of the council, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the public to offer input on a development that's in their neighborhood. And it's atrocious. And I would hope Well, I would request, actually, that you, as the planning director, convey to the League of Cities and Towns the dissatisfaction of this Planning and Zoning Commission
happy to.
with this course of action, and urge the legislature to reconsider approval of 2447. How does that sound?
I
Does
like
that
it.
sound-
I'm happy to do that. Well, in full disclosure, staff, that's a lot of pressure on staff as well. I mean, I very much believe in having projects move forward in front of a political body. There's, we already struggle with the trust and transparency aspect of what we do as staff. They're adding things that are time constraints to us that, I know people have heard it a number of times, but we are limited in terms of how many bodies we have to move the workload forward. So now that we have to do things, allow for these at-risk opportunities or expediting things, again, it puts more on our plate, but I would go back to, most importantly, I do not disagree with you at all. I would rather there be a public process in place so that there's an understanding of the community of what development is happening. Well, so let's get into this a little bit, because I want to.
So I have a question too.
Okay, one more question from my hand. I understand that the process that we're going to go through is our committee considers what's in front of us now, and we would make ultimately we would make a recommendation to the town council. Town council would then consider the change to the ordinance, right? And then
Ordinances.
we have this going concurrently with a review of our zoning process. And I'm just wondering, we can give all of does the statute, and these are things that I would like to explore when we're redoing the zoning, not now. I'm not trying to stand in the way of getting this done by 1 January 26, which is what the mandate is. But I'm wondering if we could insert in our code where the planning director might be able to call a public hearing to gather input. I mean, I would like to comply with the law, but try to weasel around to accomplish some things that maybe we would like to see in the law. And so when you're talking to Michael Baker and company, would you tell them that we have a profound interest in maintaining as much public input into the process as we possibly can?
Chairman, yes, I've already told them that. And so
You're so smart.
well, like I said, I don't know about that, but I would say that I'm uneasy about this legislation as well, just
I
as
think-
everybody is. And
I
so
think it puts staff in an uncomfortable and.
it does. But I would like, if I could add, I want to really, I think I've pretty much given you my whole presentation. But this to do now and is correct, as you had mentioned. We're trying to meet the requirements of state statutes so that we are compliant. I did reach out to Matt Kleisico with Michael Baker, and he's dealing with this in other communities as well. And I think actually the upside is that, yes, we will be revisiting this particular topic, and trying to work with him creatively as to how can we bring something forward that the community is aware but still comply with the statute requirements. He is working in other communities that are testing different things, and they've got their legal counsels kind of working on things too. And so this was basically the conservative approach, just to get us compliant. And then as we go through the update process, this is definitely going to be a topic of discussion, as you know, because we're also updating our citizen participation ordinance, and maybe there's some sort of relationship as to, I'm not sure if we can push it as far as getting a governing body to still be an approving body, but at least we can make a process available so that there's an opportunity for the public to provide input.
Okay, thank you very much.
So
You're welcome.
all of the kinds of variance approvals that we have been doing since I've been on the board are now going to be handled by staff.
Well,
Is that true?
no. So,
Okay.
so let's get into this. So the House bill, which became effective in March of this year, amends a certain part of the state statute, specifically, as I was mentioning, referring to administrative approvals. And so it's administrative approvals of, specifically, this is what the legislation says: site plan, development plans, and we interpret development plans as construction plans, so that's almost like building permits or infrastructure permits. Land divisions, lot line adjustments, and lot ties. Those are sort of, again, they're not subdivisions, but they have to do with creating lots. And then importantly, preliminary and final plats and plat amendments. So what's interesting in Carefree, so basically there'll be no public hearings required for several of the things above. Our site plans never were a public hearing, but they were a public meeting. So they went though to a board and you all made the final approvals. Land divisions, lot line adjustments, and lot ties, those are things of somebody that's creating lots of 3 or less. And so those have always been administrative. I shouldn't say always. There was a subdivision committee at one time, but I would say since I've been here, those have always been administrative. I think, of course, the main concern is the preliminary and final plats and plat amendments. So preliminary plats would always have a planning and zoning hearing and a town council hearing, as well as the final plat would just typically go to town council. And in fact, town council just approved a plat amendment at their last meeting. So definitely there is concern. As I mentioned too, it allows for these at-risk submittals for early grading and infrastructure projects. And it also, the legislation requires for an expedited review process for those qualified applicants.
Stacy,
Yes.
can you give us an example of at-risk submittals, just so we have some context?
Right. So typically in the town of Carefree, when somebody applies for a building permit, we expect them to complete that building permit before we allow any work to take place. So what the at-risk grading permit will allow, and again, please, we'll go through some of the language that we're proposing. We tried to make the language as tight as possible to make it as big of a hurdle as we could by still also complying with state statute. But what it says is that, well, again, preparing a site, can sort of, if you can get that out of the way as you're getting the rest of the permit, because the permit might be looking at structural plans, electrical plans, the kinds of things that might take a little bit longer. But once they get that permit, they're off and running to actually start the structure, start the foundation and everything like that. So getting I guess one way you could getting the property shovel ready, so to speak. And so it just allows them to start a process before the formal permit has been approved. Yeah?
Stacy, I understand time is of the essence, and that we need to approve this because it's effective 1/1/26. However, I think when we go over this again as part of the zoning update, I would like to have legal here,
Yes.
because I think there are a number of questions that are appropriate to this law. And also, I think the council, who's not here, but obviously you can, well, part of the
The town council.
I think this should also be taken up with the Arizona League of Cities and Towns,
Okay.
because I agree with Peter. I think that there is an interest on the part of the citizenry of the town, not to necessarily not be able to comment if there is a major development and whatever the conditions are of that, et cetera, that they have some input.
I don't disagree. I
Is
don't
it-
disagree at all. And I think working with Michael Baker International, who's working with, for example, the town of Paradise Valley, they have the same concerns. And they're kind of going through the same process in terms of, in fact, I think they're actually updating their zoning ordinance as well. And so he's working with their legal team to they really wanted to just say, hey, and I think we want to be that aggressive, although I would also like to just be sure that it has legal foundation.
Sure.
In the sense that they're looking at, because the state statute says no public hearing, literally that's the language. Is there a way to say, okay, well, we won't do public hearings, but maybe we'll do public meetings, but they're even hesitating at the moment, I believe, in the sense that making sure the legality of that approach still holds water with the Attorney General too. So definitely, and I think Michael Baker understands our community and definitely on board to be aggressive as to how we can have as much of a public process as legally possible.
Is there anything in this statute which takes care of the situation where an applicant self-certifies and you determine that it's inadequate in any event and you turn it down? Do they then have an appeal right? What happens in a situation like that where
Well, we're not doing self-certification, so we just said that's not, we want you to submit for your building permit and go through the regular channels and have the different departments review it for applicability to all of the codes. So we're not going down that road. But
doesn't the statute say that engineers and architects self-certify that they are in compliance with all of the rules?
that part of the legislation says that towns may adopt a self-certification program. We're not proposing that. However, we must allow for at-risk grading submittals as well as an expedited review process. I would say that, and as we kind of get into the presentation a little bit more, that we've tried to make those requirements as tight as possible. And I think that it's still, for the at-risk submittals, it's still at the discretion of staff if that is possible to move forward, as well as expedited review. Expedited review, because we already had a fee associated with expedited reviews. However, it was only pertaining to industrial, which we don't have, commercial and multifamily projects. So again, at least we're not looking at all these single families coming in and wanting to have all these expedited reviews. So it, and it makes sense in this, let's say the northeast corner is ready to move forward and they want to go through a more expedited process. We have that ability in the commercial zoning for them to, if they pay the appropriate fees, to move projects forward that the town believes are important projects to move forward quickly. That could be it. Thank you. Makes it a little bit easier. So as you know, we need to comply by the end of the year. Having our town council look at this at their December meeting, pretty much we have to allow for 30 days for any type of appeal to that, but then so it really kind of meets the calendar date of starting the beginning of the year. The documents that we are looking to amend right now, through public hearing, we're looking at ordinances. So it's the subdivision ordinance, which refers mostly to the preliminary and final plat and the land division information, as well as the zoning ordinance. And the zoning ordinance really is where there it talks about an appeals process. That is part of the legislation as well, ensuring that there's an appeals process to any of these actions that now town staff is in charge of, as well as the expedited review and the at-risk grading. I show that does impact. We have site development review manual. We have a site development review manual as well as our land divisions manual. That's just information that will be updated, but that's where you find a lot of this new ordinance information. So, those will also be updated in our new permitting software as well. I think one thing that's also important to point out, although, again, I do strongly believe in the public process and things moving forward, a lot of that legislation also talks about reviewing these developments and with objective standards. And I would say that we have always looked at things in that manner. I think being a statutory community, we've never looked at, or at least since I've been here, dictating design, dictating things that, again, are subjective. And so I think that we're a little bit ahead of the game in the sense that because we've always been statutory, we're not the type of community that allows for, we don't have a design review board. So we've always kind of processed things in that manner. So looking at the ordinance, both of the ordinance that we're revising, sort of the key revisions include, as you know, under the subdivision ordinance, would be the administrative approval of preliminary and final plats. We're removing that public hearing requirement throughout that document. It did also give us a moment to clean up some things. For example, we had some outdated references related to fees, and agency names had changed over time. And so, in essence, we're aligning with the state's administrative review requirements. In the zoning ordinance is where we did need to modify the administrative approval of our site plans, establishing a clear appeals process. And so again, I think that when we look at and when we're in our update process, we'll probably find a better place to put some of this information. However, that appeals process now has a broader outreach because now it's about appealing any preliminary plat or final plat that staff may have approved, that an applicant or may have denied, that an applicant then has a process to reach out in terms of that appeal. So, and Commissioner Hardy, you mentioned something about variances and things like that. There are still certain processes that still require public hearings. A variance is one of those. It's more specifically these larger land development proposals that our staff will be now staff approved. But just as I had mentioned, like with the northeast corner, any kind of rezone, text amendment, entitlement, general plan amendment, that is still going to go through a public hearing process. But going back to the zoning ordinance, it does establish the clear appeals process, and it does now add those provisions for an expedited permit review and at-risk grading. So in our development review manuals, we'll just look at really mirroring that information that is now being updated in the subdivision ordinance as well as in the zoning ordinance, and just clarify the submittal materials and review steps. In our development review manuals, both the land divisions and the site plan, we would highlight a lot of the steps that somebody would take, and some of those steps now had to be removed. So again, as mentioned in the site development review manual, we just updated, we're going to update that information. The information has been updated as was presented to you to reflect those new procedures. And so this is a public hearing because, again, being a text amendment. So again, I'm happy to answer any additional questions that you may have. I don't know if you have any questions about the information that was presented in terms of the corrections. And then, Chairman, you'll open a public hearing and take comments from the public, close that hearing, and then discuss amongst yourselves and prepare yourselves for a motion.
Did I hear you correctly? I can ask you a question now.
You still may ask me some questions if you
Okay.
still have any, yes.
I had a question about on the which one is this? The one that has the Roman numerals.
The zoning ordinance.
Is that
There was a-
zoning ordinance? Yes.
Mhm.
Way back in, and I'm not going to dwell on this, but on section 9, page 9,
Mhm.
if you have it way back there.
Yes, there's, mhm.
Really interested, that 2B up there, that seems like a dangling sentence.
2B, is there a space placed specifically in the ordinance? That table was to try, and you
No.
point out 9.9, in fact, that actually was added text to allow for the at-risk grading permits, not for expedited review.
Right.
I'm sorry, so you said
But-
something about
but
2B?
Just take a note of it and talk to Michael, to our
To Nick.
friend,
Mhm.
on that. And what I also don't understand by structure is that too seems to be a whole new added subdivision, but it doesn't reflect that all of the rest of the numbers got bumped down.
Can you tell me where in, you're referring to where in the zoning
It says
ordinance?
at-risk grading is 2. I'm at 9.9, Roman numeral 9,
In the document itself?
yes.
The at-risk grading. 2B? Uh-huh,
Section 910,
Mm-hmm.
2, paragraph, and then
B.
B.
All substantial grading and
There you go.
drainage-related issues associated with the project have been resolved to the satisfaction of the town engineer. So,
Is that a requirement?
Yes.
It shall be, it doesn't say that. It doesn't, it's just dangling there. But, and then, that's all I want to know.
okay. Well, I think what it's trying to say is that, it is saying that all substantial grading and drainage-related issues associated with the project have been resolved to the satisfaction of the town engineer. So the town, basically saying that the town engineer is comfortable that there's no issues, that if they did move forward with their at-risk grading, if they wanted to move forward with the site, that there's no outstanding issues or any questions that might lead to a future problem. But you
Okay.
want a
Any
couple of
other
words
questions?
added to that? Okay.
Nope.
Can I have a motion? Who wants to be the dastardly person
No,
that
first-
does this?
First, you want to open the public hearing.
Oh, I'm
I
sorry.
know.
There's a public
We
hearing.
just talked about how important the public process is, so this
Well,
is a public
I know, I'm all in
hearing.
favor of it. There's a public, but I didn't, my agenda doesn't have a public process, but
I have it on the slide for you, so.
you have it on the what?
This is a public hearing, yeah. So on the
Okay.
agenda, this is called out as a public hearing.
Okay, We are in a, I move, no,
No.
question. We are open in a public hearing.
Yes, are there any?
Anybody, I have no slips. Does anybody have a slip? Do you have?
Can I fill one out after?
Yeah.
Is this on? Oh. Colleen Rose Skirty, council member. I agree, Peter, with almost everything that you said. This bill takes all the power away from the public, from the government entities, and puts it with one person, which I love Stacy, but it's just not a good thing. Hopefully, there will be some opposition to this, some revisions coming in the next legislative session, but I think that we need to be aware and we need to work on it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public care to make a comment? Ask a question? Okay, the public hearing is closed. I will take a motion that's written out for you right there.
I move to recommend approval of case number 25-11-TA, the town council to include planning director or designee modification where applicable.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it, do have it so ordered. Any announcements?
No other announcements this evening.
What?
No other announcements this
No
evening.
other announcements? I'll take a motion to adjourn. So moved. Second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Ayes appear to have it, do have it so ordered. I just want it to be noted in the public record that the next meeting is supposed to start at 4:45 and it is 4:43.
Beautiful. You get a minute break.
Thank you all.
Pretty good, Peter. Right down to the minute.
Before you guys concluded
We'll
the
give
previous.
her- We'll give her a second.
Yeah, 1 minute, thank you.
I take it you're. Development Advisory Board. We don't take roll. We are going to hear about the town center positioning update. Mr. Prokopek.
Thank you, Commissioner Burns and Commissioners. Yeah, I'm pleased to have Amy Malloy and Heather Person here to present. We hired them to help us with this position strategy, and we've talked in the past about kind of how we approach things here from an economic development perspective, and it's the 4 Ps basically of marketing. We talk about product, price, which is really the value proposition, promotion, and then position is the other one. And we've spent a lot of time as a community really talking a lot about and doing things that are part of our Village Center Master Plan, now the redevelopment plan, as it relates to the product. And we've made decisions on signage, we're making decisions on circulation and parking, and a lot of those things that have material impact to the town center. And we've done some, cleaning up of some of our right-of-ways and those things. And at some point, you start to figure out why is it and what are we trying to bring and what's the position and what's the market capacity of this particular area from a retail destination perspective. And so what we wanted to do is bring in a third party to be able to kind of ask those questions both internally inside of the stakeholders inside in Carefree, businesses, representatives, property owners, as well as have an outside look in as to what the market thinks where we fit in the overall market from a retail destination perspective. And so that was where the expertise of Evolve is. I'm not going to go back into their backgrounds because I did provide that as far as the attachment through the scope of work and who they are. And so with that, I just want to leave it that today's presentation is an update milestone along the pathway of ultimately having a report that's going to go to council. So this is just to give some feedback as to where we are to date and be able to have some kind of intermediate conversation where they can outline some of the things they've done. If you have any additional questions or things that they want them to consider, this is our opportunity to have that conversation. Thanks.
Well, thank you, Steve, for that introduction. Heather and I are really happy to be here. We love the town, and it's exciting to put faces and names to some of the conversations that we've been able to have with you guys the last, I think, month here. So thank you for that opportunity. I think we can go ahead and get started. So Steve said it best. We have some you should probably just scroll.
Oh, look at that. Oh, shit. Shoot. That's so fun.
Yeah.
There we go.
That you guys probably don't. I'm noticing we probably should have had Stacy help us with our technicals.
It just doesn't.
And now it's a little.
It doesn't like me pushing on it. So.
I think it's not loaded on the. There we go. Okay.
Very gently.
Okay. So sorry. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So just real quickly, we have Heather and I, between the two of us, interviewed, I think, probably at least. Thanks, man. I think we somewhere we knew there was technical support. Yeah. So we were interviewed probably so far and have done outreach to over 30 people. Many of you here in this room, internal stakeholders as well as external stakeholders. So and by external stakeholders, we mean developers, tenants, brokers, consultants, zoning attorneys, architects, engineers from the greater Phoenix, Scottsdale MSA that we've done business with and that we think have creative, reputable development acumen in the greater Phoenix market. So we kind of culled all this information together, asked some specific questions you guys may remember to kind of get a sense of what we saw as some maybe potential, what the findings are, some constraints, what some potential opportunities are from that. And I think we can probably, I'm real nervous to do this. Okay. So I'll let Heather go from here.
Thank you. Great to meet all of you. I know you're all familiar with this map. I just put this in so that we can toggle back and forth in case we want to point anything out and chat about it in more detail. And it sounds like Steve provided you with the scope of work, but I wanted to make sure that we kind of reiterated what we were here to do. And again, this is kind of the first milestone in the process. We don't claim that it's all done. We wanted to come and share what we found so far with you, take additional feedback, and then we'll go back and keep doing our work and then ultimately present to the council. But like Steve mentioned, part of our process is to evaluate the town's current perceived position, both internally and externally. So like Amy mentioned, we've been speaking with a number of stakeholders already here in the community, as well as those who haven't had the chance to develop or work here, to get their feedback on how we can encourage more of an experience-based retail destination. Looking at the potential to have an appeal to multiple markets, including tourism, which I know you already have, both locally and regionally. Identify issues hindering Carefree's success from optimizing that position, which Amy will touch on. And then ultimately to make recommendations for achieving the optimal position with other Carefree commercial nodes, the local market and regional market, looking at public and private property improvements, the tenant mix, like Steve mentioned, the business environment, and other retail programs and marketing. Look at assisting and analyzing on development opportunities for the town hall parcel,
and then look at maximizing opportunities for some key vacancies that you have within the town, including that 8,400, hopefully you can hear me, square foot space in Carefree Marketplace and the 14,500 square foot building at the intersection of Cave Creek and Carefree Highway.
And so just kind of in general, what we saw when we were digging into this is really, especially if we focus just on the Easy Street portion, it's kind of an outdoor mall without a master developer. And so you have lots of different ownership, lots of different tenancy, and lots of competing ideas on how things can get developed. And you have all of that done without overall kind of consistent private agreements, land agreements, cross-access, signage, parking, business improvement district type overarching things, design standards, hours of operation. There's no consistent overarching thing, which makes it really difficult. I think we felt that everybody was unified that we spoke with in wanting to find a way to maximize the town's potential as it came to commercial development. And I think we feel and I want to just say this out of the gate, I think we feel very strongly, Easy Street is really special. And it's lost a little bit of its shine over time. And we kind of wanted to go through this with that kind of in mind, that larger idea in mind, with the goal being, what is it that what do we have control over as far as influencing an outcome to be maximize the development potential for this area? And what is it within that control that we would recommend as kind of next best steps? So I think I am next.
I have a question. What you refer to as the Carefree Marketplace, is that Los Portales?
I think that's one of the Bashas Center with
Bashas'.
one of your vacant. It's the old,
Hardware,
the
okay.
Ace Hardware vacancy.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so kind of to dig into constraints. So this came, and I never asked this question specifically of anybody that I spoke with, and this became almost the very first thing every single person mentioned, was that there was a lack of a unifying vision. Everybody has a slightly different perspective, and some people had divergent perspectives on what they thought the kind of overall vision and focus of the town, Easy Street in general, should be, and then how to kind of create a market position. And then ultimately, what was the strategic plan based off of that? So, opportunities, development opportunities, or a new tenant will come in, and even if it doesn't fit with one person's vision, there's no understood unilateral comprehensive vision and plan that everyone's agreed upon. So it becomes really difficult to have these one-offs come in and say, hey, okay, I guess we'll let this happen in this juncture, even though this doesn't fit with what we may particularly think. So we felt a little bit like some of the overall conversations was kind of really keep it simple. There's a small town kind of special local vibe. So we really tried to explore that and when we go into opportunities. Again, it's not Scottsdale and it's not Cave Creek, and I think that's a good thing. So there's going to be some opportunistic ways to position the market for the town of Carefree according to the things it's not, also not just what it is. Aging building and fragmented ownership. Also, I kind of put unengaged ownership. There's different life cycles of owners and tenants in many of these buildings, and you can very clearly see the ones that have a high level of engagement and commitment and the ones that do not, and that's really hard to control. And then I just want to because we come from a commercial development standpoint, there are no benefit to invest from a tenant or business owner standpoint in many cases. The rents are high, and if you get a tenant, if you're really reaching to get a higher desirable tenant in and have to do a lot of improvements to your building in order to have that tenant come in, you're not going to see an increase in the rent bump enough to justify that expenditure. So it's a really, from a private sector, from a business owner, from a broker tenant perspective, that's a really difficult hurdle as well. And we have some, what we think are hopefully good creative solutions to maybe help bridge that gap. But that's why you don't see all these buildings shiny and beautiful all the time, because that you can't make up that money in the rent of what you have to put into it to get it up to a quality level. Large events, we heard, can be disruptive. That doesn't mean events in general are bad. It just means that we need to create some experiences that are meaningful and authentic to the town, and maybe have more smaller ones versus a few large ones that don't have any real interface and interaction with the existing tenants. So there's this kind of wall between the events and the benefit to the existing tenants that many people we spoke to felt was the case. Low density seasonal population. I told this to Steve, and I think I told it to many of you. You have the three major threats on their demographics. It's an old group, it's a low population group, and it's seasonal. So Heather can get into that. A lot of people she spoke to, development community, are like, oh, no. We wouldn't come to the town because those three demographic hurdles are so difficult. So we're kind of then started to put these pieces together on opportunities through that lens of how can we jumpstart the market? How can we create some driver, some anchor attraction opportunities that would increase your market from what exists day in, day out, which is less than 4,000 people, I think, annually within.
Amy, is the detriment of an older population offset by the fact that the population is affluent?
So it's a great point, Commissioner, and I think that it does to some extent, but what we find in retail restaurant is very, very fickle. I mean, it's last to every, I mean, it's rooftops and jobs and retail, and then it's first to leave when the going gets rough. So the number one thing is the number of people. It's cars, it's traffic, it's so we've got to figure out a way to jumpstart the number because the affluence will speak for itself once we can do that. That's a great question. And then we talked a little bit about this. There's no significant anchor or effective merchandising. So what we talk about is you have some stars here, right? Like Joe's English Rose Tea House. But there's not really the supplemental uses around her to benefit anybody else. So, and we call that merchandising, right? So if Heather and I are developing a site plan for a ground up retail development, we look really carefully at the positioning of tenants to make sure we have a breakfast place next to a wine bar, because they're going to cross shop ultimately and cross traffic. If we also say too, everybody loves a great boutique and a great retail. That is going to be an amenity to a larger restaurant mixed use project, never a driver. Gone are the days of tons and tons and tons of retail. In fact, Kierland, which I worked on for many years, and Heather and I use it as an ancillary kind of example in a lot of projects we do. It has 35% retail in the larger Kierland Commons Master Association. It's 35, and we all think of Kierland as Kierland Commons. That's 35% of the hotel residential resort piece of it. So just to keep that, and that's why it's very, and that has 3 wins in demographic working for it plus affluence. So just to keep that kind of in mind as we're working through this, that we don't want to over retail, and because then you end up getting lots of antique shops and lots of hobbyist seasonal owners and occupations.
Well, let me make a comment regarding that. To your point about not over relying on retail, that gets into the whole area of optionality, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And from the perspective of optionality, if we're not going to look at retail as perhaps the major driving force, then what's left to look at? And not only what's left to look at, but what's the geographic boundaries that you then have to consider in order to make that a viable conclusion. So I don't know if you're gonna get into that or not, I hope you do, but anyway, that's kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah, and that's a great comment. I think we will have some feedback to that.
Would you define that word optionality?
It's simply one of the options
Oh,
that are available.
Right, so I think it's a really, so if you can't do retail,
Right.
or if you're already maybe over retailed, right, in the spaces you have, so what are some other uses and services that can be important while still maintaining kind of the special authenticity of Easy Street? Yeah, that's a good question, and one that we asked also, and I think we have some suggestions for.
I just
Sorry.
have a question and a comment. So within a mile and a half of Carefree, we have 3 or 4 very popular restaurants that are busy all summer. They're not seasonal. They have a dedicated clientele, loyal customers. And what about share of wallet? I mean, this is an affluent area.
Well, I think one thing that we had heard from someone that we interviewed, which was really interesting, and she runs a business here in town, and basically said, like, she depends very little necessarily on the actual physical residents from the town, and sent me kind of the 5 zip codes that she pulls from on a day-to-day basis. And I think that's one of our kind of important, I don't know if it's a recommendation, I think it's an observation of the reality. The key isn't necessarily how many people you have living here. It's hard to get ground up development that way, but if you can take some of your existing building stock, convert it to some recommendations where we would have of Joe-akin uses, kind of drivers, restaurants, entertainment type drivers, we think that there would be a lot of opportunity to share the wallet, to your point, and not have it just be going, bleeding out into North Scottsdale. Yeah, great point. You can see I'm much more long-winded than Heather, so
No, she's great. She's perfect. Perfect. So I think before we move into the opportunities, kind of the big picture is it's hard to get some of these new things, some of the options that you mentioned without a lot of people. So we either have to get more people or we have to find some other unique draw that brings people in, right? And some of the folks, so Amy spoke mostly to the internal stakeholders. Many of you in this room, business owners, other folks at the town, and I spoke mostly to some of the development folks, developers, brokers, and restaurant owners, things like that. One of the things I found, I spoke to a multifamily developer and I said, hey, what do you think about Carefree? And he said, being perfectly honest, Heather, the challenge is that I'm not going to be able to get capital unless I call it North Scottsdale. The first thing they're going to ask is, why isn't it closer to the 101? So I think what that means is we don't want to try to be something completely different. There's a great, wonderful population that lives here. We want to focus on what can we do to fix some of these other constraints, and how can we find that way to keep what's special about Carefree and bring in another driver that is going to bring more people here. And I think we do have a lot of opportunity. I think first and foremost, a lot of people I spoke with said, okay, well, what makes people go to Cave Creek? That's rather far out of the city center as well, but they've got this kind of Western theme, and people that are coming to town, or even people that live here occasionally, they're going to go up and go to Buffalo Chip or Harold's or whatever. Okay, well, we want to be different here. What is something different that could be offered in Carefree? And a lot of folks really liked the idea of leaning into the wellness and desert environment. You've got that with Savannah. It's amazingly beautiful up here. You're probably 10 degrees cooler than the rest of the city at most of the year. So I think there are a lot of opportunities we could consider there. I think this is something that's already been in the works with some policies for parking, lighting, signage, landscaping, and wayfinding. So those are things for retail, especially, people really need. Right? That's why when you are seeing, okay, where's there a Starbucks? Not saying we need to put that in, but it's going to go on Scottsdale Road where it's easy for everyone to see versus having to, wind in and out. I personally think what you guys have here is really special, so I think we need to find the way to improve on it, but still keep its uniqueness. A lot of comments about that anchor being another resort, not another Hampton Inn, nothing against Hampton Inn, but instead of another limited service, how can we find something else that's similar to what you've brought and attracted to the community with Savannah? That is going to bring a lot of the people here that,
My apologies.
is it something I said?
No, it isn't anything you said. I apologize.
No worries, no worries. Something like that does bring more people here, which to your point, Vice Chair Roberts, help with that share of wallet, I think is what you called it, right? Because people do want something new. If you live here and you're one of the people that frequents those restaurants, you want more of them, right? And there's only so much that can be supported by a certain population, so how do we bring that in? A creative entertainment use, or even, some people had suggested, like, is there a museum? Is there a partnership with the MIM or another group here in town where we could have something that is, hey, when you come to Phoenix, you need to go to Carefree to see X, Y, and Z, right? And we've already got some of that. How do we get more?
One of the
Yes.
things that strikes me is that we have an amazing cactus garden, and I'm told it's the second best cactus garden in the area outside of the big one downtown.
Mm-hmm.
And you just mentioned partnership, but whenever I talk to people, I say, you gotta go to the cactus garden.
Mm-hmm.
It's a thing to walk around and look and see and spend time in. And that seems to me, maybe we kind of overlook that, we take it for granted.
I would say, I grew up in Phoenix and Scottsdale, and I have never been to the Cactus Garden, right? So I think there's a marketing opportunity there. How can we do that? Because that is the kind of stuff people love, and I think are increasingly wanting more of.
And not to interrupt Heather, but one of the pieces of that I think is interesting too is it can't just be Cactus Garden. Come visit the Cactus Garden. It has to be you're highlighting one of the restaurants and doing like a bourbon tasting in the Cactus Garden. So we talked a little bit about this. There needs to be some joint overlapping marketing with your existing tenants, right? Jewels in the tea room. Combine a couple of uses. I spoke to one of the people I spoke with, part of the community, had some great ideas about some joint shared marketing events that actually highlighted your existing tenants and existing shops and retailers and brought them into what you have already built as wonderful infrastructure. People don't have the Cactus Garden. People don't have the Sundial. People don't have an amphitheater, right? So and I think it was probably one of you up here that mentioned this, it may have been controversial. Don't have 40 events for 250 people that are also highlighting one of the restaurants or highlighting the bike shop. Something that brings a combination where you're reminding people of some of these great little gems you already have and allowing for that rising tide to float more than just walking in the Cactus Garden too. Sorry, Dan.
No, that's okay. Amy just wanted to talk about bourbon because she really likes it. But I think that's an excellent idea, and I know that one of the constraints was that the large events are problematic. I think part of that is because of parking, and maybe if we can improve on that, I think that will make a difference. But some of those smaller things, it allows you to highlight businesses. I think of Old Town Scottsdale where they have the art walks, right? That's something that there's that one area and people go do. I think there are myriad opportunities that could be put together here. I also think that what an evolution that I've seen in retail development over the past decade has been more of a focus on programming. Before it used to be like you build it, you put tenants in it, and then you sell it or you walk away. And now in many things that I tour, I sit on a placemaking council for the Urban Land Institute. We were just in San Francisco last week for their biannual meeting, semi-annual meeting. Almost all of these larger mixed-use developments have someone that is involved in programming. So they're not leaving it up to the tenant to say, I own this cool little coffee shop or the bike shop or the tea shop or whatever it is. And I don't know what resources the town already has dedicated to that, but I think as this unfolds, that could be really interesting because there are a lot of neat things that could be put together. And then I know I'm kind of out of order, but it's because I wanted to touch on the things that the city or the town may have a little more control over internally as one piece. And those are looking at tools and incentives that can be put together to help encourage new development. Amy touched on, sometimes some of these owners aren't very motivated to spend money because, maybe for their own personal reasons, but also maybe that other tenant that they're going to get in, the market rent just won't cover the expense that they had to make. So maybe there are some opportunities there. Similarly, there may also be opportunities for like a zoning or overlay or infill incentive district that helps with things like adaptive reuse, helps with things like parking. When I think of how would we accommodate this anchor that we want to bring to the area, it's hard for me to picture how it fits in here without really impacting the parking. And I know there are some places like downtown Gilbert, for example, they ended up having to kind of put all the parking in one area so that they could create that high street look, right? So I think that's something that, Steve and his team, Stacy and her team, I think there are opportunities to look at that. I obviously say that without having too much familiarity on what already exists. And I know you have Michael Baker coming in, so I think it would be, we'd be happy to sit down with them. We've provided feedback on in other cities on things we've worked on. So I think, that's kind of the high level view, and in our recommendations, we'll dig into some other things. And, like I mentioned at the beginning, this is just that first milestone. I think even as I'm here, I'm being like inspired to think of other things and how we can put them together. So,
Heather,
yes,
if I may.
of course. Sorry, I'm take this back.
I used to live in Southern California, and Santa Monica took a old sort of decrepit street called Third Street and closed it all off for several blocks and put in nice pavers and water features and trees, and it exploded.
Mm-hmm.
The parking was 3 blocks away, and people walked up and down it, and it became an enormously successful, I think, economic engine. So is it common that if communities like ours that have 1 or 2 blocks of interesting old buildings, if we got rid of the parking on the street, put the parking outside, and allowed what used to be the road to now be a walkway with planters and seating areas, do you think that would make a dramatic difference in our easy street, or would that be a big waste of time?
I actually really like that idea. Places that I go on vacation or to tour for work, when they have a pedestrian-oriented area, pedestrian-only area, I think it's really cool. You can't have it too big, right? And you've got to have the parking nearby.
Ours is only 2 blocks long.
So there you go. Santa Monica, maybe people are willing to park a little further because they're used to it. Here, we're like, where is my spot? I need to park my big SUV, and I need to be really, really close with my giant latte, But I think that I really like that idea. On some of the other things like this that I've participated on more as a panelist, it has been recommended sometimes to reduce the size of the street or whatever. You already have that character, and I think that could be a very interesting way to move forward. So I'm going to write that one down.
Well, and some of the, as we go into this, you can see, and Heather spoke to this too, as we look at, this kind of box right here, you already have some wayfinding programs that I think you're working on implementing. You have signage. You have parking, I think, master plan, and that you're working on. And there's some, I think, studies, and I think there's a need to maybe look at some vacant lots to pay for parking. I think those are fairly inexpensive ways to handle opportunistic development coming in. But one of the things that we have visually seen ourselves and came from people is we need it to be, if you're going to have a pedestrian focused kind of promenade, similar to like a Santa Monica Place promenade, you really want to make sure that you're creating, having it be really nice looking and easy for people to meander. So sidewalks need to be, similar widths, connected, not in bad condition. So as we kind of talked about some of these things, kind of what existing out there, what it could be. Some of our a little more detailed, and we tried to do our best, and it was a little more difficult because really there is a collaboration that needs to happen between the public and the private sector. When we were really looking at kind of what it would be great next steps, it wasn't like, okay, this is completely the town's responsibility to wave a magic wand and put more money in and invest. There really needs to be some joint shared efforts here, but to do our best to try and delineate for purposes of clarity. Obviously, we talked a little bit about launching this cohesive market position and marketing campaign. You guys mentioned it, I think, a little bit, this idea, and we don't want to give more to Madison, but there's some really smart joint private marketing dollars that can be spent. And we think that that, in addition to a business improvement district being privately developed, that Heather will get into in a little bit later, that there's opportunities to kind of raise funds from the private tenants with the public dollars to really launch what exists as important. Your desert gardens, we said this, and I think someone said this, we're not building any more mountains. So the mountain views are our oceans. And you guys are so uniquely positioned to have that in your entire periphery. And then you have this really special, interesting, urban building stock that has a pedestrian, piece to it already. You've invested in really important infrastructure like your town of care, the arch. You have the sundial. You have done all these things. So we kind of just have to kind of polish the diamond here a little bit and then come up with some creative private suggestions and maybe some development anchors. But we also think there could be an infill incentive district. So part of that, and this is why we really want to make sure that we just maybe do a brain dump to Michael Baker Group. We've done this with Michael Baker Group in Glendale and a lot of places. We want to make sure that they are thinking about, and I was listening very attentively to the presentation earlier on the House bill, the Senate bill that passed, because in many ways we celebrate that as commercial developers. I can't tell you the time to get through cities now has killed multiple deals and created such a cost. In a post-COVID landscape, it is 3 times longer to get through a city process for any project, and those are death knell things. So a project like an infill incentive overlay, I'll explain to you. So an example of it is you basically say, we're going to do an infill incentive district on all of Easy Street. And what that means is when tenants come in, when new development comes in and they want to do a remodel or they want to do a redevelopment, if they meet a high level of design criteria and standards that we have collectively agreed, we will provide them expedited permit or plan review, a break in impact fees. In many cases that are already built up, you don't need new development impact fees. You're not building new infrastructure. That you don't need the offsetting cost. So sure, and in some cases it may not be applicable. So I'm sure Stacy's like, Amy, you're saying nonsense. But we've done it, and I did it in my past life for a small city in Arizona, where we basically put a whole section of the town in an infill, and I worked in the economic development at the time. And I'm dating myself. This is over 24 years ago. But we basically created an infill incentive district and said, okay, Harley Davidson comes in and you're developing things at this way better than standard level. We're giving you a break on all these things that we wouldn't really need to collect anyway in this area. And I mean, it was a nominal financial contribution from a small community that I worked in to allow for, and it starts off and it's a goodwill. So it's a carrot approach versus a stick. And I'm not saying there's not a stick approach in the future either, but I think it's an opportunity to say we are wanting the best and knowing you would do the best if there was some a way we could bridge the financial discrepancy. So sorry, and then I'm telling I have my notes here of keep it simple, which is not what I'm doing. But if we keep going on to some of these, we talked about this, the unified vision and a 5 to 10 year strategic plan based off that vision. Everybody knows what this place is. It's small town, it's unique, it's special, it's an escape from the grind and an escape from the valley. It shouldn't be kitschy, and it shouldn't be one specific thing too much. Doesn't need to be Cave Creek. It needs to be art-driven, desert-theme-driven, not too much high-end, more focused really on an elegant, unique, timeless approach. So if we can kind of create and weave that vision, if this group and the council, the wisdom of town staff can kind of create what they think that looks like, and we can craft some specific vision statements too, then it becomes really easy of saying, okay, this is what we want to look like as we grow up and evolve, and so this is the plan in place to help us do that. And then I think the last thing is making sure to execute on some of these existing policies that you've already put in place.
When you and I spoke, you said something that I thought was really intriguing, and that was, we talk about like a unified vision, but it was also the idea of how we can find commonality, the shreds of unity that would help us be able to, you kind of break things apart, and then you find those things. What are some of those things you think that where we could all come together?
Well, it's interesting. I think the one, and I think I said this at the beginning, everybody we talked to, regardless of where they were coming from and what their position in the community and in the external, specifically the stakeholders in the community, all wanted the absolute best for the town. Everybody came from a perspective of how can we have this be the highest and best it can be and not lose its authenticity, right? So sorry, John.
No, no, I don't disagree with that, but I like working with real stuff, And it's great to have a vision statement, right? Whatever that might be. But beyond the vision statement, we have to be realistic and look at what do we have to do to change the flow of traffic, if you will. And I'm not talking about cars, I'm talking about people going outside of Carefree to Scottsdale, Desert Ridge, to High Street, etc., to do their shopping, to do their eating, to do their buying clothes, etc. What do we have to do? What are the magnets, if you will, that'll entice people to come this direction?
Well,
I've lived in Scottsdale and Carefree since '65. My in-laws had a business. For a long time, the downtown Scottsdale area, that downtown area that has the Sugar Bowl, etc. in it, and if you've been around for 40 years, you know what I'm talking about. They languished. The downtown Scottsdale area languished for a long time. And I'm not so sure what ultimately caused it to begin to expand and begin to be more attractive as to what it is now. And that's a question for you that I hope you have an answer to.
It's fine. So yes, thank you for that question. I also appreciate a little bit you're providing a good foreshadow for our next couple of pages of recommendations here. So, but just quickly, I do know what changed downtown Scottsdale because I had the good fortune of working at, and this shows you, phases 10 and 11 of Scottsdale Fashion Square. So when the Nordstroms went into Scottsdale Fashion Square, that changed the face of that area. And it honestly, there is still a little bit of a town gown feeling between the art district area in downtown Scottsdale and the large 2 million square feet of regional retail, abutting it. It's with Scottsdale Fashion Square. So that's not a perfect, but you ended up putting with a 2 million square foot retail project over time. So many other people getting eyes in an area that without really even trying created an offshoot of interest in downtown Scottsdale.
Right, but that, and I agree, but that also took a lot of partnerships.
Yes.
Which is one of the things that you established before. You had Nordstrom.
That's right.
You had an open-ended mall.
Yeah,
That's
you
what
had,
Fashion Square
you
used to
had
be.
Goldwater, and you had to redo the road. So you had to redo the infrastructure to unify them all with Dillard's on one end and Goldwater's on the other. So,
And you
yeah,
had to address the water.
That's right.
The waterfront.
yeah.
all
And
over.
and this is why I think I started this off saying many things about this, because my background for a decade, I worked with Westcor and Macerich. And this felt to me very much like a disparate outdoor mall. And I got to work on Kierland, so in some ways it's similar to that, or Biltmore, where you just have a lot of fragmented ownership. And you also don't have unifying CCNRs, a unifying business improvement district, unifying cross-access agreements. So, and now I think that's getting into, we started off with, here's what we think some town responsibility is to start off, but then we're gonna keep moving on what we think some private sector responsibility is to keep us moving out of vision and into practical next steps,
Right.
if that's helpful to you.
It is, because one of the things I'd like to hear eventually from one of you two, or both of you, is Carefree itself is a small town, 3,800 some odd people. And so from a partnership perspective, as I said earlier, I think you have to increase the geographic footprint
That's right.
in terms of anything that you ultimately recommend to us. It can't just be Carefree itself,
That's right.
so.
I don't quite know where this idea fits in, but we're talking about vision, and we talk here a lot about the difficulty of dealing with a town center that's inward facing. We talk all the time about, well, you don't really see it because you're on Tom Darlington or you're on Cave Creek, and you have to actually go into the center to find it. I think we need to somehow turn lemons into lemonade and turn that into a benefit as opposed to a detriment. The idea of coming into Carefree should be a special thing. Now we're off of the strip. We're not in Cave Creek where there's one big noisy business after another and it looks like a giant strip mall that's spread out on a string. We have something very special, and you have to leave the main road and you have to go in, and then it becomes quiet, it becomes tranquil, it becomes something very special. In other words, the idea of thinking of the inward facingness of our town not as a detriment, but as a benefit. And I don't know
I think
how
that-
this, I don't know
that's
what we
great.
do with that, but it seems to me that that's a way to think about our town that would be helpful.
People will find places, even if they're inward facing or not as easily accessible. We always say there's 5 rules to traditional retail. It's access, it's visibility, it's signage, it's parking, it's ingress and egress. So to the extent that you can accommodate for those, and in the confines of your kind of existing layout, then the key becomes, why are people wanting to come here despite its non-traditional layout?
Yeah.
Which means we need to have more anchors than just the English Rose Tea House or a couple other good restaurants. There needs to be something else, and we have some suggestions for that and some ideas that we got from the development community to share.
Were you going to ask something? Okay. I would add on your comment about Scottsdale. You know, I remember when I was little, I lived in Moon Valley, and, you know, on the weekends, sometimes my mom would be like, oh, we're going to Scottsdale. And we would pack up in the car and, you know, go to Old Town Scottsdale. And, you know, as like a 7-year-old, I thought it was boring. You know, I didn't want to go look at like these, turquoise rings and stuff. But I think that Scottsdale had, part of the reason was the Nordstroms, but I also think they are starting to move away from some of the cowboy themed stuff. They reluctantly have added a lot of multifamily, so maybe for them that worked. And then they've recently redone the Civic Center, which is also inward facing. But I think as a result of those things, they've been able to attract a few more F&B opportunities that are appealing to a broader population. So it's not just the tchotchkes, and it's not just the, you know, 22-year-olds going out to the bars. They've been able to broaden. Yeah, we're working on Amy is working on a hotel renovation there. We worked on on the Civic Center Mall. We worked on a hotel, or a restaurant there, Uchi, which is a Japanese restaurant. So I think if we can find ways, to your point earlier, to bring in a couple more things like that, where it's like, this is the destination, you know, you need to go up to Carefree to have this experience, and kind of consolidating what the three of you have been mentioning.
I think part of that also is that, to the extent, I think we all agree, Carefree is a very special place. But, so that means we don't want little outlets of the stores that are at the malls. We want something that is unique to the little town.
Exactly.
And I think of the little towns I know of around the country, seldom have chain stores.
Right.
I mean,
which,
Ithaca, New York, a number of years ago, the center of town hollowed out when an indoor mall was built out on the highway. Their response was to completely transform the downtown with cobblestone, walkable streets, cute little boutiques and restaurants, and several blocks away, a parking garage, which was attractive in Ithaca, so you didn't have to clear off your windshield.
That's a very good point. Yeah. So I'm going to move on to some of these other recommendations. I'll start in the upper left. So collaborating to acquire or redevelop underperforming parcels. So one of the challenges, constraints that Amy mentioned earlier is because of the fractured ownership, you know, sometimes there's a reluctance to make improvements, and there may be some underperforming parcels where if the town could either acquire them itself or work with a master developer, do an RFP or something like that to be able to gain control of a larger piece, it opens up more opportunities. And I think we'd have to look at that in more detail. Amy has a lot more information on which things are working and which things aren't. Were you wanting to add something?
Yeah, just want to give a quick example of, are people familiar with Uptown Plaza? It's on the northeast corner of Central and Camelback in Phoenix. So it's the AJ's grocery. So my previous bosses went and started their own company when they left Macerich Westcore, and they really had their eye on Uptown Plaza for a long time. But they knew the existing owner did not really want to spend any money, didn't want to make any risk, and they just felt, this is such great real estate, and the bones are so interesting. We could really come in here and do a refresh or maybe a little bit of a redevelopment and get in some new tenants, but they knew they would have to take all the risk. So they worked out a strategy where they basically told the owner, we will come in, take all the risk on doing a renovation and raising the capital to do that, and we will take all the risk on re-tenanting. But then basically we need you to give permission and to give us participation if successful. So there was like a success participation, because they knew, I mean, Bobby Williams, he's the one that found Sam Fox in Tucson and put him in Kierland. So he knew he could re-tenant that thing if they had it if the mouse trap was different. So, and there have been some hit and misses even with that project, but it was an incredible windfall for the owner and an incredible windfall for kind of the development team. So in some cases, you don't need to own the property. You just have to have a willing participant to say, we'll say yes to, and then there's some potential JV opportunities where, you know, future phases could be, and we're doing this in a project in Mesa where we felt this is a development opportunity in one section of a project in Mesa, and we've been brought in to help them execute on a master development plan for that with the landowner. So we think that that's a potential creative solution for some of these areas that kind of need to catch their next wind. In town, yes.
Just a real quick comment, and I'm glad you brought this up, because these are some of the details and nuances, and I know it's not keeping it simple, but it is something that's very important. And so one of the issues that we have here is that you have a lot of owners who've owned property for a long time. They've inherited properties, and so their basis in these properties are zero, right? And so their incentive These aren't investment, they're income properties, is what they end up turning themselves into. And so the question becomes, is, how do you solve that problem? So if you go in and you offer somebody $2 million for a portfolio, what do they do with cash, right? How do they get taxed on that? And so you get into these situations where property owners potentially want to, just carry a note, or they're just trying to find ways to minimize what their tax exposures are. They want to, and for them, they're older too, right? Some of them live in the community, and all they want to do is produce some level of income stream that's guaranteed, right? And that's what they feel like they have. And so that's one of the, and I don't know if that's something that you guys have dealt with, but I'm glad you brought that up, because it's one of the things I think when we start looking at partnerships and how we have the private sector partner with private sector, how we can deal with that.
Yeah, and that is a big thing. I've worked on a number of properties over the years where the owner doesn't want to sell because of the tax implications. And so Amy's example at Uptown Plaza, and we can talk offline in more detail about that, but basically the way it was structured, there was an appraisal done at the beginning, said this property is worth X. The developer came in and made all the renovations and got the loan, got the equity, took the risk. And then at the end, they did another appraisal, and then there was a split of the profits. But the owner was able to keep the property. So she didn't have to come up with the money to make this big investment when maybe he's out of state, doesn't have that money, doesn't want to deal with it. Didn't want to sell and have tax implications, but was able to participate in this and now have a much nicer property. I think they actually did end up selling after that. I think Bill Levine bought it, but
Yeah, they did.
so I think there are some opportunities, and we can also connect you guys with people. I'm actually thinking, this is kind of off of this, but I think we should consider bringing in like a dig studio or something, a group that can come help take that aerial that we looked at and put together a plan where we can look at, each space, what we think, and also look at your idea, like how could we restructure to have something where it's more pedestrian oriented. And, so I think that's something we can talk about afterwards, because all these ideas, it's helpful when we can, see them on paper.
And the other example I just wanted to give to you, I think, because you asked how do we do this. So the Uptown Plaza is an example. Another example is downtown Gilbert. And downtown Gilbert, they will jokingly say, oh, we're a 40 to 50 overnight year success. Because they had to come up with a vision, come up with a strategic plan, not deviate from it. And part of that strategic plan, the strategies involved in that, was the town buying land. So when they had opportunities, the town acquired parcels in order to basically control their own destiny. And it still took them they were the largest, when I was, starting at Macerich in the early 2000s, that was the largest growing municipality in the country, right? With high family numbers, high demographics. And it took them 40 to 50 years to build one viable run. Oh, and they had to build parking and fund the parking. But
Let's do it faster than next time.
yeah, well, we get to learn, I think, from things like that. So there's different ways to skin the cat, and we're not saying that either one is the best option. But I think Steve asked me the question, and I've taken a little bit of a longer approach to answer. But I think there's opportunities for the public sector, for you guys to be involved in the outcome. And then there's opportunities for creative joint ventures with landowners and the private sector who can serve as a master developer to execute.
And I promise we won't be that much longer. I know you probably have other things to do. We only have 3 more slides. But Savannah is obviously a great win for the town. Could we look at partnerships with them? I had someone suggest like a walking path. I mean, how fun would that be if, from downtown Carefree, you can walk there. I do understand, elephant in the room, that Savannah may have a different interest in maybe wanting to keep their customers
More exclusive, yeah.
there. But I think it's something that we could look at.
There's no reason to that the existing tenants in Easy Street can't take advantage of having Savannah without Savannah having to participate with the tenants, right? So it can be, come to our wine tasting, we're going to be raffling off a stay in Savannah as part of that. So it's such an incredible amenity that has such a larger draw that these guys should be taking advantage of that, even if they don't directly participate.
I think though, again, no disagreement, but we need more revenue. Bottom line is we need more revenue. And so we can have all the amenities we'd like, whether it's,
You use the microphone, please.
oh, whether, testing, whether we, no matter what the amenities are that we have, they don't generate dollars.
Understood.
And at the end of the day, the problem with this town, at least as we see it, is that we need to increase our revenue base. And maybe that's all retail. Maybe it's part retail, maybe it's part residential. Maybe it's developing a medical mall. Maybe it's putting something, either small or larger, in terms of private-public partnership, that causes people to come up here, because there's nothing like it within the next 10 miles or whatever it is. Because without that, we're back to filling individual space, call it retail space for the time being. That'll generate a limited amount of revenue. And as the infrastructure in this town continues to deteriorate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, the revenue that's being produced or generated by the retail isn't going to cover the costs.
Well, and I think we recognize that same thing. I think the way we're looking at it is what needs to be put in place to get that. Because if we come right now,
Exactly.
we aren't going to be able to produce that. And so how can we find a solution that doesn't take too much money, but that can allow us to position the area to attract exactly what you're asking?
And then my last comment, and
No, go for
in
it.
respect to that, it may take more than a public-private partnership, because it may take this town putting in some money.
I think so too, and I think that we would just need to look at, well, what is the best investment to make? Is it acquiring some of these parcels? Is it looking at, some incentives or things like that? So I think that is definitely worth continuing to explore. And Savannah's not the only thing. There are lots of opportunities in Scottsdale. What are the other resorts there that we could do some cross-marketing, like, okay, here's something to offer to your guests to go up to Carefree for the day to do X, Y, and Z, right? I think there is a bigger pool and not just the resorts, but, people that live there too, right? I think there's a marketing opportunity. To your comment about the cactus garden that I feel horrible that I didn't know about. So there's a story there that I think could make a difference. Amy mentioned the business improvement district, so somewhere like Roosevelt Row, if you've heard of that, and north of downtown Phoenix, they did this successfully to help because they had a lot of disjointed. There was a large homeless population, there was disjointed ownership, vacant parcels, graffiti, all sorts of things, and they had a similar thing where no one wanted to be the first one to make an investment in making the area better. And so they came up, I don't know all the details, and it obviously is very specific to each area, but came up with a set of standards that everyone could kind of agree to that, sort of like a mini HOA, right? So it allows people to say, hey, that's not working, or this is working, and how can we have this rising tide that floats all boats?
And responsibility of the private sector.
Right, so it's not on you guys or on you guys to police it, but what is that character that we want to maintain? Because we don't want someone to come in and put something that's totally different and goes against what is unique and charming about the area, because that's not really helping anyone. And then the event, I think we kind of already touched on that, but I am thinking to your comment about, is there a portion of the area, Commissioner Hardy, that could become more pedestrian oriented? Does that enable us with events to do food trucks and things like that right now would be a little challenging? We could still do them, but makes the parking more challenging. But pop-ups and other things that can come in and be specific for a weekend. Like another reason, you know, I'm not going to go to the tea room every week, but if there's something unique and different, it's going to bring more people up.
And then I think we can
I'm
go.
on the next one too, but I didn't know if you wanted to add something.
No, I think we. I have stuff on the next one.
Oh, okay. We talked about economic development tools, and I'll let Amy weigh in on that when I'm done with this slide because I know that's more your expertise. The signature anchor attraction, I personally feel that the Carefree Mall, which originally when I drove around I was confused because I thought it said Town Hall, and I'm like, wait a minute, the Town Hall's over there, and I realized I just couldn't read. But I personally find that piece to be less compatible with the balance of the area from an architectural standpoint. It's also just a very big building that I think blocks access and visibility to some of the cool and unique things. In my perfect world, I wish there were a way to replace some of those tenants in a different area. And I may be seeing something that someone's going to lynch me outside. I hope not. But I just think that could be an opportunity. Also, with your town hall parcel and whatever's happening with that, I think those are the two biggest areas that could be really impactful for a museum or another kind of destination-oriented establishment that's going to bring people up here. Because it's going to be hard, and especially like Amy said, and you know others have said, getting all of the smaller tenants, you'd have to get a bunch of them together. Not saying it can't be done, but if we're looking at what is a nearer term opportunity, I think that helps. Financing tools for the absentee owners, that's exactly what we were just talking about with that Uptown Plaza example. I think Steve hit the nail on the head that a lot of them are probably just looking at, hey, this is my extra source of income. Yeah. I don't put a bunch of time into it. I don't lose a bunch of money, and I don't really feel like putting a bunch of time into it. So what can we do as a community to incentivize them to be aligned with the vision that we have for the area? Another big piece is that state land parcel on Mule Train. I don't know if people have been considering that for anything, but I do think that that's big enough that could be another larger resort or destination piece. And I think it would be worth a conversation with the state land department.
And we don't know anything, so
but
we're
okay.
saying this into a vacuum.
So that's a no. Okay. That was a suggestion that I got from one of the people that I had spoken with.
Yeah.
So
That's an external suggestion Heather got from the developer.
yeah.
Yeah, so
Okay.
we actually ran that through the MRED program.
Yeah.
Yeah, we ran that through the MRED program with ASU, and they did their class project on it. We did a full evaluation on like what the commercial compatibility was, and so we looked at that along with the northwest corner of Tom Darlington and Carefree Highway, and then the northeast corners, and then that particular parcel. So it was one of the things we did in an evaluation, and as we kind of came through that evaluative process, you know, we talked about resort there, but then there was also this large contingency within the community that we really needed to make sure that we preserved open space. And so the original general plan talked about some kind of partnership with maybe some bidder who would come in, residential, and then be able to work with the town to provide open space. And then there's been a larger effort in the community to privately fund, you know, the acquisition and then potentially develop that as some type of, you know, open space amenity for the community to preserve that, you know, character of the desert ocean. I think that's where.
Okay.
Well, that
Yeah, and I
property,
can totally
that property
understand
is owned by the state, correct?
It's state land.
State land.
Yeah, so it would have to be put up for auction.
Yeah.
And more than likely, ideally, you would have to have a large developer come in, bid on it, buy it. And the only way they're gonna do that is if
They're going to make money on it.
they're able to develop a mixed-use development
Yeah.
on
They're
that
never gonna
property.
get any interest in, and never be part of town if it's gonna be preserved as open space
Yeah.
in perpetuity.
There is a large empty parcel just east of the dog pet resort on Cave Creek. That's the last big building in town. And right next to it is a large parcel that's empty. I think there's some plans for development, but that certainly could be more retail. And And then past that is now gonna be a 33 house development?
Yeah, East Creek, East Creek.
Okay.
With all those houses going in, the idea of that parcel that a lot of people want to be open space, I think the pressure to develop that is gonna be very difficult. I think that's probably gonna guarantee that that parcel become open space.
And is that coming from the residents or from the
I
town?
think the people in town see that the pressure of more houses is gonna they're gonna say to the town that we need even more commitment to have that other space.
Let's move on from that.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, I think that, I'd love to learn more about it another time, but we don't need to do it here. And I will turn it over to Amy for.
Yeah, so I just want to go back
yes,
quickly to
please.
some of the, so economic development tools, we talked a little bit about some of those. But one of the things we've seen be successful as you're looking to encourage new tenants into an area, especially an area that has some barriers to entry, is this kind of, I kind of put it cart to shop, where, for example, there's like a really successful local burrata maker in, it was in like the Surprise area. And they came from a successful restaurant in Peoria, an Italian restaurant called Fabio's on Fire, which has won a bunch of like little awards and everything, and it's all local people. Well, the handmade burrata guy had a food cart that he opened and would bring to the parks in the city of Surprise and various other events, became so successful, and people traveled so far to come to this guy that he's now moved into an inline actual physical tenant space and has already built this huge following in the community. So, one of the questions that I asked were, is there a great bakery? What's the talent? Where's the talent?
I've just written down one of the places that would be worth targeting is the JL Patisserie.
Perfect.
And they went viral for
I read that.
for various reasons, because of a mean influencer trying to buy free meals. But they are expanding rapidly, and that's not the location on Shea is, I think, their second or third location.
Right,
I've just spent a week on Cape Cod, and it was fantastic to be able to walk in to Falmouth and go to this incredible French patisserie, and people who were standing in line had come from a long way away. There isn't a good French patisserie. Paris baguette, I think, is Korean.
It is over at the promenade. Yeah.
But that's the closest patisserie we've got.
That's right.
And morning goods are, and that's something that would bring people up here.
That's a great. So, and I had written down pizza, bakery.
Oh, we've got more Italian restaurants.
Well, and I guess I would just say something that is very specific, right? So somebody that has a very specific skill and is doing something over and above what currently is offered. I think coffee, a really great roastery.
We've got some fantastic ones.
Alongside, it's Lars's place.
Yeah.
I was gonna say Lars's place. Okay, so I was like, that's maybe a relocation of something like that, but also then a merchandising, where you have that next to some other uses that are also would be rising tide. So you have your bakery and coffee shop next to each other.
I'd love for Lars to be in town center.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that would be fantastic.
So that brings up another idea too. If there are other tenants like that you can think of that aren't in town center, is there kind of a domino effect strategy where some of them may be encouraged to relocate to town center if they buy into the vision that is, developed, and then it maybe creates opportunities in those other parcels that have more land area to be like completely reimagined. So,
And we don't want to transfer sales tax, right? So, and I appreciate what Commissioner Nimsky was saying, like that we do want to figure out how to grow the base. So this kind of La Patisserie is a great example of who are some interesting stars out there. There was a really, really great French restaurant in like near Sun City Festival that won all these awards and was in a strip mall and eventually just closed, but it was just a great little French restaurant that won all these awards that people would go to, and they over time were able to expand and move into another location. So I think that who are some stars in the area, and I think what we all realized is they can't necessarily be like a large, huge Sam Fox type use. We need to kind of like celebrate some stars in the area that you can bring into and that want to be in a walkable environment that has some really special offerings.
Yeah, we don't have a boutique kind of toy shop that would cater to all the squillions of grandparents here.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and just another couple examples that we talked about. I mean, obviously you have the English Rose Tea House, and that is a destinational thing. It's an event. I go every single year. I've gone with all of the ladies in my family, and sometimes also my son Brendan Malloy wants to come because he loves the scones. But we go every year. That's kind of an annual pilgrimage for me. But what are some other things that people can do more consistent traffic? Like something that seems like it's standing the test of time. We don't want to follow too many trends, but this kind of speakeasy where you have a restaurant and you have some little, it's like a special classed up kind of evening. And I think this town shuts down a little bit early. So if you're looking to kind of expand your hours in addition, no offense to anybody, to expand we shut down early too. So that's what happens when you become middle-aged. So, but I think like the Americano has that great on, Scottsdale on the 101 has that great little speakeasy they opened underneath called Tell Your Friends, where it's absolutely fantastic. You can't get a reservation unless you're months in advance, but it just creates these buzz. I know I hate to even throw not something that would be, you'd have to keep it authentic to the clientele, but breweries that are really local and really well done are incredible draws and really fun community gathering spaces. So those are just a couple ideas that we had thought of and that we had heard from the development community as some potential attraction opportunities. And then last but not least, just a couple questions. How can Carefree motivate? And these are questions for you guys, questions that we've asked ourselves in the brokerage and development community. How can Carefree motivate out-of-state or absentee owners to transact on vacant parcels or underperforming parcels? Is there attraction or restaurant that Carefree can attract to the area? We talked about some of this. I love the idea of doing satellite MIMs. MIM is right down the street, ostensibly. I know you guys had a partnership with the Herd before, but the idea of music and you do like a wine tasting or you do something else with the Cactus Garden tour, right? I think that creating some cross collaboration where there's something people are engaging in would be fantastic. I've gone to the Shakespeare in the Park at the Desert Botanical Garden, and that's unbelievable, and uses kind of local restaurants to host those events too, which is great. Could the town subsidize new development on the town hall parcel? So is there a way, because the other thing with these kind of cart to shop is you don't just want, or these new developments, you don't just want them to go in, you need to incubate them. And I think there are some economic development tools and strategies to help them stay successful, not just start successful. What's the market here? What's missing? What needs to be recruited? What needs to be phased out? And then we just had the question, this is, I think, a big opportunity, but what's Los Portales seems like there's a lot of opportunity there. And so we don't need answers to these. These are just questions we threw out as we were looking at it and as we were talking to the development community.
How much have you worked with Industrial Development Authority bonds?
We have not. We've done opportunity zones kind of early in their infancy before, and then I very randomly worked on tax increment financing districts before, and then we've worked obviously with property tax excise, but I haven't done anything with industrial development bonds.
Okay.
I'm writing it down though, because now I'm going to go home and look it up. Thanks for.
Well, I mean, one of the strategies, and you touched on it, or at least you hinted at it, is assemblage. You know, if the town wanted to go in a bigger way than one-offs, right? One after the other, if there was financing available for an assemblage strategy, then that gives you different options for, you know, what goes on those parcels, for lack of a better term, so.
So I can talk about that. Because that's what I was in the municipal bond market. But, so industrial development bonds for small towns are typically non-rated and very expensive. So if you had some type of revenue that you could attach to it, it would be very, very difficult for us to take any of our sales tax revenue and attach it to anything other than what, you know, fire right now has 1 cent and then 2 cents for basically everything else. So that would be difficult. And then a lot of deals are backed by property taxes, which we obviously don't have here in the town, so.
Amy, your question is, the state is the lost your towns. I know that there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of ideas floating around. And one of the ones that really appeals to me is to have my way in, if I owned it, or if I could make all the decisions, I would turn that into a place that had a lot of little food stands and drinking places, and a place where you walk in and you go from here to there to there. There are all these little kind of pop-up, almost like an interior pop-up stands with food and some retail and bars, beer places and mixed drink places, but a place where people would walk in and out, open it all up, get rid, literally blow out the sides so it's more open. So it's the kind of thing where people wander in and out of this big covered space. I think that would really attract a lot of people. There's a place, my son lives in Colorado Springs. There's an old 100-year-old building that had been abandoned for many years, a brick building. It's been completely repurposed. They've opened it all up on the inside. There's little Korean places to eat, little Chinese, little Mexican places. There are bars, and it's just, you wander and you mingle. And it's filled with people all the time. And it's like it's a real center. It's like, oh, let's go there.
So I would say I've seen that be very successful long-term in one way, that there is one major draw, and then all of these other ancillary uses benefit off of that draw. Right. So I just was recently in Palm Springs, and they had this big building that had all of these internal, really great little boutique shops and jewelry stores and plant stores. But the draw was there was a great, great restaurant inside it that you just took an order from the counter. But the line to stand and make your order and be in the outdoor spaces was right in front of all the shops. So you're window shopping the entire time, and everybody then eats their food and goes right back in and shops. Another place where I've seen that be successful, and I'm trying to think, it's I lost my, but it's there's one draw, an anchor of some sort that's food typically related, that is really good and special enough, and they just take advantage of having that foot traffic get eyes on, because if you don't have visibility and you don't have access, those guys are dying on the vine.
So as I understand it, this is a draft report, right? Or an interim report?
Yeah.
So at which point will there be a final report that lays out, the goals, or basically the SOW, your findings?
I'm sorry, can I interrupt?
No.
Let's expand that. Well, I'm sorry, the chair's taking the chair. What are your next steps, and what is the timeline, I think is where you're trying to get
That's where I
to.
was going, yeah.
Yeah, well, I think this is our first blush on kind of walking through some of these ideas and getting feedback. And Heather, thankfully, has taken very good notes of all of this conversation. And I've compiled some details in this. I think we'll take some of this and we'll probably present it back to staff. The goal ultimately, I think, is to take this to the council and to get their feedback, but we're happy to come back to however you think would be a good next audience for this.
Well, one of the things that we've done in the past is, since there's really, I don't know if the council's going to vote to approve anything. I think it's just kind of accepting the recommendations. Is maybe we just do another joint workshop session where we can sit down around a table and really have a good collaborative conversation about a lot of the findings and results. And one of the things, I just wanted to kind of ask you guys if you think that's kind of if you like that approach, or we can do it separately, but I do like the more collaborative discussion. And I think we get more people from the public to turn out for those too.
I guess one of the things that I'm unsure of is in several slides back, you had a lot of not redevelopment districts, but private CCR kind of thing, and then you had something else about, well, a business improvement district. One was, I got the impression, was publicly imposed, and others were collaborative amongst the private. All of those various, there were like 4 of them. I don't know what they were, but I guess it would be helpful to get 1 or 2 page white paper on each. I don't know what they are. I don't know how big the hurdles are.
We had that for this.
Yeah.
But what resonated to me was we're anarchy here, as opposed to the world that you normally play in, which is a developer has a parcel.
Not always, but yes, sometimes.
80% of the time.
Yeah.
And they control standards, they control hours, they control lots of other things, all of which we don't. But some of the suggestions that you had seemed to me to either collaboratively or with a heavy hand impose some order so that we can move forward.
Yeah.
That kind of
We're looking to create a structure that
Bingo.
kind of
So,
manufactures what a master developer would look like.
So what I would like is, how do all of those various things you've talked about we've heard a lot of people, oh, you ought to have a collaborative, you ought to have a partnership, you ought to do,
More detail.
Okay,
Yeah,
wonderful.
well-
What are the next steps to get there? But part of it, to me, is education about what are your options in terms of how you can go, and then how soon. But I think that would be helpful background, because this is all like motherhood, apple pie, Chevrolet. It's all wonderful stuff. Nobody's going to disagree with that. But where do we go next? What's the next thing? Where's the decision point? I don't think anybody's going to argue with anything you have here.
Yeah, well, and that's why this is kind of the first milestone, was to put it in high level. And I think we're going to go exactly where you're talking about, where we're going to ultimately produce a report that has a lot more detail. But in the interim, I think we need to do a couple things. One, I think we should talk further about whether or not there's an opportunity to engage an architect or land planner to look in more detail on the area. And then 2, specific to your question about the business improvement district and some of those other things, I think we should identify a couple, 3 representatives from the area, like the local business owners. Because I think if we were to have a workshop with everyone, it's a little harder. We don't want people like calling out, well, Bob over here doesn't do anything to his property, and it could get ugly.
Do you think?
Bob is amazing. But I think if we could have a couple, 3 people that might be interested in helping talk through some of this a little bit to figure out what people want, and then we can make some recommendations to put in that final report of like, okay, what are the first, second, and third steps? What is the just do it, low-hanging fruit? And what are the other things where we need to plant some seeds to help, ultimately enact the vision?
Excellent.
And I think in terms of timing, I'd like to have the opportunity to chat with Steve a little bit, but I'm kind of thinking some of that The first stuff is probably in the next month, and maybe in the next 2 months we can come to council, but I don't know if that's what you were thinking, or if you were trying to target a specific date.
I mean, I think we're trying to target a time frame, and I think this
Okay.
is the right time frame. And this kind of comes into all the other things that we're working on, right? So we're working on circulation and parking, and we're working on potentially what we're going to do with the town hall site. And there's a reason, when you get into government, everything seems to be linear, right? You do X and then you move through. But in this case, a lot of these conversations are all coming to a head. And so you maybe need to make decisions on one thing that come out of the discussion of there.
I think that your work would be a very valuable input into the town hall decision that we're going to be making. Because we're just kind of, without the vision thing, we're kind of flailing around, and everybody has an opinion, and I think we need to get to a strategy. So I don't know if it would be, maybe January would be a good time for us to have the sit down together with the council.
I would think January, because we got a lot of stuff coming up in December.
Right.
Yep.
We have a lot. Don't know for sure, but I like the idea of you kind of getting together with somebody, some movers and shakers, so to speak, to try to hammer down a vision. We need a champion.
Yeah, and we don't want them to feel like it's being
That we're
forced on
picking it,
them.
right.
Right? So, and I mean, between Amy and Steve, they know, probably who some of those folks are,
Right.
because you guys have had those
In
conversations.
this process, and in all political processes, which this ultimately will be, you need a champion.
Yeah.
And there's a few potential candidates here, but you've got to
Yeah,
get them
so-
lined up. and
So
we
Joe
can't-
Gimbel's already stepped up.
I was gonna say, you are a little bit ahead of the game, and that you have a person who said, put me in as leading the effort on a business improvement district and all the other agreements that would go with that from the community. And that's Joe. And she's also happens to be, I think, a shining example of the kind of tenants you want to have long-term. She's the right person for the tough job, which is not always the case that you get that alignment. So you've already, I think, have a huge hurdle you've already kind of accomplished.
So if we were to kind of get this, just shoot for January, would we have a draft report by then, you think? Or you're still looking to gather more feedback? I'm trying to, I know that you want to collect info before you try to draft it.
I generally prefer that, but what if we,
But, hey,
what
just
if we
write it
target,
anyway. Hey, ChatGPT.
Yeah, that's what I do. No, I think it would be helpful to have a draft that we could talk about before we present, so that, because and I know you've spoken to some of the council members, but I want everyone to feel like they have ownership in the process, but I don't know the process and what you guys find
But
most successful.
Why I think that a report would be helpful is we get caught up with what happened tonight. You have a message to deliver, everybody's interrupting you to tell you what they think.
Right.
We're paying, I understand, but we're paying you to find out what you think
Right.
and to guide us. Everybody's here's had an opportunity to do input.
Well, and what we've found
And,
successful.
but if you get something drafted, we get the council together with us and we sit down and do a roundtable kind of a thing. I think it would be helpful if you had that material before we sat down.
Yes, I agree.
Okay.
I also find, and I think this is part of our scope as well, but what is really helpful after we have that council meeting and everyone's kind of on board about, okay, we like all these ideas, here are the ones we want to go do, is to have another meeting with the stakeholders. But rather than getting any sort of fighting, it may then be, okay, here's what we've found, and kind of helping to start the vision and getting them on board. We can bring in those champions to help, but I'm thinking that's kind of after the council
Right,
meeting.
and I somehow think there are going to be a few phases of your engagement here.
Well,
It happens.
yeah, and
We can't get rid of us that
yeah. Well, and I hope you can see we're invested in the outcome of
Yep.
this too, and
Well, we got a Moon Valley person here.
I know. Well, I'm
That's a
a
really
third generation
Thunderbird.
Glendale, which I think I told you about on the phone.
Yeah, well.
And my husband worked at JLBC, so I told him, I said, I got to talk. You'll never guess who I got to talk to. And I told him, I said, I got to talk to the former head of OSPB, and he's like, Peter Burns? I'm like, yep. I go, he's now on the commission. So I go, he's now the chair of the commission. So, I mean, we care about, we definitely, and this is Heather and I mean, we do work for commercial developers and tenants and landowners for our day job, but this kind of stuff, no offense, doesn't pay super well, but gives us, I think, the greatest bang for our buck, because building great communities should be what anybody gets into the development business to do. And you guys have, like we said, a lot of things going for you. There's just hasn't been unification on the vision and then on the plan. But if you want, I mean, Heather put this together in a very presentable way, but I have a white paper that we've done that says, here are next steps. Here is the private sector job. Here's the public sector job. Here's what won't work. Here's what will work. And so we kind of know where we're going with this. We want to give you guys a chance to have feedback and input in the process.
Is
To make us
January
feel good.
Is January okay with you guys? Because I know your time is available in January if we shot for that kind of time frame.
I think so. I think we should get some
Yeah.
time on the calendar in the next
You
week.
you guys discuss.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Right.
we'll do that
figure it
offline.
out, but we'll target a January presentation of rough findings, maybe a joint meeting with the planning commission and the council, however Steve thinks would be the best layout, or maybe 2 different meetings, but we'll share and we'll provide that to you guys ahead of time.
Great.
I've got a question for Steve and Stacy. You know, when everything is kind of moving along the way we're talking about it, did you guys anticipate at some point also doing a presentation to the public?
For
The residents of Carefree.
when you say a prison,
Well,
case.
in other words, once we arrive at a vision, and once we arrive at a timetable, and once we arrive as to what that might take in terms of resources, are we going to allow the community access to that information, that report, for lack of a better term, to get their reaction?
Yeah, so we can discuss and work on. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, I mean, and I know we've had this conversation, and one of the things that we wanted to do was get like unfiltered professional advice, right? And so when you start going down that pathway of, of soliciting outside, with the community, it gets a little weird and it gets political and
Not necessarily
yeah.
soliciting.
Yeah.
Sharing. I
What,
think it's
sharing the
after.
information, sharing, here's what we're gonna do, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, I
Because
think-
at the end of the day, this community consists of a lot of experts in a lot of different areas.
Yep. Yeah, and I think that's the whole point here is that, and I think that's why maybe getting a joint council commission meeting is that, it really comes down to this idea of unity and consensus to where we can get that message out, and then it's easier to start putting the message saying, hey, that people can participate in those conversations and hear what's going on, right? Connie's here, she's involved. And so, but try to see if we can get more people leave and come out, and that's why maybe the joint workshop is better, because I think more people are more likely to come and participate and listen in. And then I know Madison will work to try to promote and try to get some of this information out as well. But yeah, I agree with you. That's definitely what we'll do as part of the education piece. And again, it plays into all the other things that we're working on, right? Because it's going to influence that, and it should influence that. That's the kind of information we need to help make the best decisions. So you guys make up the best decisions. So.
And we get to do the truth telling, because we have no skin in the game. We're not building and developing in the town, but we care about it, and we do that in our real lives. So we can come in and talk to our kind of friends and colleagues in the industry and mine what we think would make sense, understanding the context of the community.
A marvelous resource for the town, and like I say, I see multiple phases to this engagement.
You guys are like, oh, these girls are a bad penny.
I'm going to end up spending way too much money because I already booked a reservation at the Tea Room and Savannah.
Yeah.
So I'm like, shoot. My husband's like, can you stop it?
Yeah. But I do want to just say one of the things that I've heard tonight that I want to express is, and it's a big component of this, is when we start looking at our overall tenancy and our tenancy mix, you start breaking it into chunks, right? You've got your destination tenancy, and then destination retail. You've got your destination attractions, the gardens, or whatever. All these things need to come together. But then you have your ancillary type of retail, right? And I think right now it seems like we have a lot of ancillary type. People are just waiting for customers to come walk into their doors. And yet we do have some really great destination businesses. And so how do we capitalize on this destination traffic? But that comes to the discussion where I think more it's going to be more along the leadership lines, and where we talk about the community is, there's this thing about vibrancy versus the streets need to roll up at 5 o'clock, and we need to have that conversation as a community. Where's that appropriate mix, right? If we want to maximize and be as efficient in retail as we possibly can, it may push people beyond their comfort level of, maybe it is a little bit noisier till 9 o'clock at night or 7 o'clock at night. I don't know how that, these are the things that we need to talk about and get their input on, but those are the conversations at the leadership level and the public level, to your point, John, that we'll need to have with the community to see what they're comfortable with and how we move forward.
I will entertain a motion.
Boy, that was like pulling teeth.
Second, all in favor say aye. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you very much.
This will come through, it's just random, but it will come through to you when I get on Wi-Fi.
So where in Boone Valley did you live?
I lived